Lenten greetings and Lenten joy to each and every one of you, you hobbits, wizards, Jedis, kings and queens of Narnia, those of you who are reading along with the Evangelist Breviary. I wanted to make a quick video to encourage you, whether you've been doing it every day and you love it, or you did it for one day and haven't touched it since, and no matter who you are, anywhere in between, or maybe someone who bought it and it came and you haven't even opened it yet. I'm encouraging you, not because there's anything magic about this particular book. I mean, resources are made for people, not people for resources. But Lent is this unique time of the year, and it's not necessarily a time of darkness or sadness. And quite often I think people sort of equate the word Lent with deprivation or with going without or giving things up. And all that can happen during Lent. But remember, what has the church always said about Lent? It's a time for prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Each one of those three things is a pathway to freedom. So that's what Lent is. It is a pathway to freedom. Like, think of the Israelites when they left Egypt. So yes, they still had 40 years, just like we have 40 days of Lent. They still had 40 years ahead of them. But it's not like when they left Egypt that they reserved their sense of freedom and joy until they reached the promised land, which was the ultimate promise. No, Miriam whips out a tambourine, starts dancing and singing. So yes, they're not there yet. They're not at paradise yet. The end hasn't happened yet. But they were on that night freed, and then they began their journey into freedom to get to know better the God who had freed them. Or even go back to something like Noah on the ark. So yes, there are 40 days where he's out on the water wondering if he's ever going to find land again. So it's true. You could think of the 40 days as a time where there are things he doesn't have. He doesn't have land. He doesn't have certainty. He doesn't have answers to all his questions. But he knows he escaped a destructive flood. So there is, of course, a sense of freedom while you move toward a deeper understanding and experience of freedom. My friends, I hope that you, like the scripture says of Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. That's an important verse. Who for the joy set before him endured the cross. I hope that somewhere in Lent you find joy to set before yourself and realize that yes, we're moving 40 days toward the freedom that is celebrated when we celebrate the empty tomb. But just like the Israelites leaving Egypt the night that they did it, or Noah escaping the flood the night that it happened, we have begun our freedom. You should be able to hear that the chains that bound you are falling off. I also think of a hot air balloon. You've ever actually in person gone to a state fair or something and seen hot air balloons as they fill them up with air? You know they're tied to the ground in like 30 places, and there's this time when it's time to actually get on them. They start untying one at a time all the way around all the ropes that are holding it. Every time one rope is undone, the balloon sort of starts to pull up just a little bit more, and then they have the ability to sort of drop sandbags and things like that so that it can go even higher. I've always thought, as I watch a balloon prepare to take off, that's what Lent is. The balloon is there. It's full of the air. It's tugging and tugging and pulling. It would be bound for the air, except for the fact that it is tied down or that there's weights of sand holding it there. And those are the things that have to be changed in order for that hot air balloon to take off into the sky. But it is ready to go. The air inside of it is ready to fly. There's nothing wrong with that balloon, but it is tied down. And the faster you can untie those knots going around, the faster that balloon is going to take off for its destiny in paradise. My friends, that's what Lent is. We are going around a balloon that is already full of air, that is ready to go. The resurrection has already happened in history. So we are being pulled up toward glory. But we have the ability to run around and start to take apart, to reflect on, and do what we need to do, to do something or not to leave things undone. That actually begins to untie with God's help. Just like we say in baptism when we take those vows, I will with God's help. So we move through Lent with God's help, finding where we have a pile of sand that is going to affect the way we fly, where we have a knot holding us to the ground. Untie that thing. So Lent is not about being sad. Of course, we can grieve when we see the things that we've allowed to hold us down, to take all the freedom of the resurrection that comes to us in baptism, that is pulling us up to the sky. And we start to look at the areas of our life, not just things that we've done or left undone, but things that other people around us have done or left undone. Sometimes you're a victim of someone else's brokenness and sin. Sometimes you are the victim of your own. Sometimes you don't even know where it comes from, but you've reached a point where you are tied down or there's a weight of sand pulling on your joy. So Lent is preparation time. It's not just training. as if you're trying to get better at things. It's a time to move into your freedom. Do what you can do to untie the knots that you have tied or someone else has tied. It's an exciting time. And I hope that something like the Breviary comes alongside you and gives you a simple thing to do each day. So, and especially on Fridays when there's the examine, where it lets you look in your life, keep going around your balloon again and again and see, where am I packing heavy sand that's holding me down? Where am I holding someone else's heavy sand in some kind of codependent relationship with them? And the truth is, neither one of us now are soaring, because the weight that one person has created, you are now helping carry. And in doing so is not loving them unconditionally. It's allowing you both to miss out on some of the levity. The gravity of sin is keeping you from the levity of the resurrection. So it is a time to free yourself with God's help. How exciting! And also think where we are in the liturgical year, because you might say to yourself, well, what is the goal? Literally, what is the goal? But the church in our liturgical year answers that question, specifically in the lectionary. A lot of churches that follow the common lectionary, there are still some Sundays where different churches within that lectionary group do different things on Sunday. And one of them is the Feast of the Transfiguration. Remember the last Sunday just before Ash Wednesday? Do you remember going back? It feels like a long time now. It was not this Sunday, it was last week. And this feast where we have Jesus being glorified right in front of witnesses. And you actually saw other human beings glorified, glowing. And you may have wondered, well, why do we do this before Lent? It is intentional that we do this before Lent. Because Lent is a time of year where we are you ready for this? We are preparing for transfiguration. Lent is not a season to be sad, or a season to give up chocolate, or give up swearing, or things like that. Sure, I mean, if those are things that are tying down your balloon, yes, stop those things. Jesus says to the woman, go and sin no more. But this is not the purpose of Lent. Lent is not a moral enterprise, first and foremost. No, we only make moral choices differently in Lent after we reflect on our lives and see where the choices we are making or have been making are leaving us in a relationship with God, and that we're willing to make new choices. But the goal is not to be a good person, nor is there any kind of valor or nobility in being a sad person during Lent. No, we've been freed. The balloon is pulling and pulling and pulling. So Lent is a time of work, but not work for its own end or to be proud of yourself. Remember that the readings warn us against that. Don't fast so that you look hungry. Don't give away alms in public so that you look like you've given half your life away. No, because the point isn't to posture or to appear like someone who's growing in their faith. The point is to grow in your faith. The point is to have more of the air of the resurrection that lifts life, lifts the body, lifts our spirits, lifts our hope. That is the project of Lent. And when you think of the Transfiguration as being the signal, a lot of people who teach leadership skills, Jim Collins, the guy who wrote Good to Great, Stephen Covey, that guy that wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, for the last 35 years, pick a leader who talks about leadership, Simon Sinek, Malcolm Gladwell, and you'll notice in their main goals for people for being good leaders, almost all of them have a version of the same thing. And I think it's Jim Collins that actually coins this phrase, see the end from the beginning. See the end from the beginning. That there's something about great leadership that a person, it's not that they're prophetic and can see what is going to happen, but they have a goal. They see that goal and they see it at the beginning of their work. And that's what lets them make sacrifices and set up relationships with other people where they're also going to invest in a project because they can see the end from the beginning. So the Feast of the Transfiguration, now do you get it? The Sunday just before Lent begins, Lent, the season where we're preparing for our own transfiguration, our own embracing of the freedom that has already come in the resurrection, that is already ours in baptism. But God is not going to untie all of the ropes. God is not going to dump all the sand and just rip it out of your hands. This is the way we participate in what has already been done on our behalf by the love of God. So we have this feast to see what it looks like when the human person is elevated and glorified. Glorified human person. That is the goal. Remember, it was Irenaeus who said a very long time ago that the glory of God is the human person fully alive. So that's what the Transfiguration is. It's this vision of the human person actually elevated in glory. That is the end, and that's why we read it just before Lent begins, so that we see the end from the beginning. So my friends, there's nothing about Transfiguration Sunday that says these people showed up sad and walked up to the mountain sad and having given up chocolate or giving up swearing. That's not what happens in that feast. What happens is you see God reaches down and lifts the human person up in light and in glory. And it's an invitation to say, now Lent begins. Join us. Come up the mountain. And it's God. It is God who will glorify you and take you up. But we have this choice in Lent to participate in our own glorification. Remember, it says in Hebrews, do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds in Christ. What an invitation at the beginning of Lent to not conform, but be transformed, be transfigured. So obey the feast of Transfiguration and say, that is the end that I see at the beginning. And I hope the things you read in here, checking in with your relationship with God, getting inspired by some of your favorite epic stories, that these are things that focus you on the fact that you are being transfigured. You're not just giving up something in Lent just to take what you have and take half of it and put it away. No, again, Lent is not a moral project. Lent is a transfiguration project. We know what it looks like. We've been given a vision in the Gospels of what it looks like when a person is fully alive, and it is the glory of God. Irenaeus was just reading the Gospel for the Transfiguration when he says it. The glory of God is the human person fully alive. That's what we're moving toward in Lent, to be fully alive. The work has been done. The first Holy Week has happened and the resurrection happened. But we get to dive in. We get to untie the knots and understand why we tied them in the first place. And then we will jump in the balloon and with the community of the faithful, and we will soar. That's the joy set before us at the beginning of Lent. But that means that you have to have a sense that you're on this epic journey and you're not alone. Which is why, again, I hope some of the readings, for example, let's say you're kind of like more of a Jedi person, and reading passages from people like Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi or Luke Skywalker, that those people remind you of what it means to have a greater goal, a rebellion against evil and darkness. Or maybe you're more of a Harry Potter person, and the wand is much more of your tool in the world. And I hope if you read passages that you find in the Breviary about Harry Potter, that also gets you connected to the idea that you're in an order of the Phoenix, that you're not alone, that even though you're facing dark forces and dementors everywhere you go, that there is a community of people who will go with you. Or maybe this is how you walk through the world. You're just a hobbit and some friends looking for some joy and saving all of Middle Earth. I don't know how it is that you want to journey through Lent or with whom you want to journey through Lent. But the reason to give these epic stories is to remind you to journey through Lent and not sad. That's why the gospel says, wash your face if you're fasting. Don't give your money away in public so that you get into this kind of performance thing where you're trying to look holy for other people. No, take the journey with Christ. It's a journey toward your own freedom, and you're participating in it, and my participating in it means that when it comes, when Easter comes, when that Easter vigil or Easter Sunday morning comes, you will have the feeling that you took part in cutting the ropes as your balloon floats to the sky. This is the season of our transfiguration. So pick up your breviary, say your prayers. And I know it's hard to do something every day because life happens. And you might skip a day. You might even skip a week. I know myself, I was all excited last week to have a big, varsity, wonderful Lent. And I was thinking about the Shrove Tuesday, what I was going to do here with Lisa with pancakes and things like that. And we had these ideas about Ash Wednesday that we were going to fast or read the daily office or begin reading the breviary. And then Tuesday afternoon, early in the day, before I could even get my pancake plans sorted out, I actually wound up having to go over to the emergency room, and I spent most of the week in the hospital. I didn't see that coming, and I'll be completely honest. As we rushed off to the emergency room on Tuesday, I did not pack this book with me. In fact, I didn't think about it at all. And the great spiritual plans I had for Ash Wednesday just didn't happen because I was in the hospital. There was no fasting. There was nothing like that. There were beautiful things that happened in the hospital, but it was not the week that I thought I would have. And I certainly didn't do any of the spiritual practices that I had originally laid out. So, but I'm home now, and I'm well now. And I'm picking up this breviary again, even though all of last week was basically blank, because life happens. So no shame, no judgment, not for me, not for any of you. This is all invitation. I know myself, now that I'm feeling a little bit better, I want to get back on track and realize that Lent is the one time of preparation during the year where the whole church together all over the world has the same goal. We want to be transfigured. We don't want to just give up things. We don't want to just experience deprivation. We want to be transfigured. That's what we're invited to, and this is how we seize the transfiguration. That's why we had the feast, so we could see the end from the beginning. So my friends, I am praying for you. I am cheering for you. We have the ability to be transfigured in Christ. All we have to do is say yes.